Usually when we think of twin flame triggers, we give this word trigger a negative connotation. We think of a trigger as something that wounds us, that hurts us, because it causes us pain. What we don't realize or sometimes forget is that this experience of pain through these triggers within our twin flame connection aren't actually triggers for the purpose of causing us pain. The pain is the manifestation of wounds being uprooted, being brought to the surface for the purpose of healing. Imagine that you have some kind of tumor in your body or something that needs to be removed. You might go in for a surgery, and in the duration and recovery from this surgery, it may cause you a great deal of pain. It may cause you to feel as though you are hurting. You may even wish that there was just a way to escape this pain. But throughout this painful process, you also have an awareness that this malignant thing was damaging you from the inside out and had to be removed from your body, and that you are going to be better for it. Twin flame triggering is exactly the same way. When twin flames feel as though they are hurting each other, this is just a perception of the ego. They aren't actually inflicting wounds upon each other through this triggering. They are bringing wounds to the surface, bringing attention to wounds so that they can be healed. Just like the surgery to remove this tumor, we all have within us certain negative forms of stored energy. You could think of like energetic tumors, negative patterns of behavior that actually come from negative subconscious beliefs and patterns of thinking, because really just a belief in the subconscious mind is a thought that was either said to you or that you said to yourself so many times, you finally accepted it as truth, as a belief. And because you accepted it as your truth always manifests in your reality. These beliefs, even the negative ones, even the ones that cause you so much pain and disconnection, will continue to play out over and over until they are finally acknowledged and healed. Sometimes these are referred to as our shadow aspects, our shadow elements, or our shadow self. The shadow self is anything about ourselves that is outside the light of our own consciousness, metaphorically in the shadows of our consciousness, which is why it's referred to as the shadow self to begin with. This shadow self is formed because from a young age, we are born into this world and we freely, confidently, and authentically express who we are on a soul level. But very quickly, perhaps so quickly that you don't even have stored conscious memories of a time when you felt that free and you felt that confident to express your authentic self. Very early on, we are programmed by a broken society, a society that has negatively programmed our parents, their parents, and every generation down the line, leading finally to us. We receive this same mind programming in the form of discipline or negative reactions to parts of our authentic soul self. So let's say you loved to create. I just saw a child drawing pictures and making crafts. So maybe this is you and you were a very artistic child. But let's say in this scenario that your parents, who, by the way, you are dependent on in a very real, physical way. You need your parents. It is a kind of codependency that has to exist physically or you wouldn't survive. You are dependent on these caregivers for survival. And then they reject this artistic side to your authentic self. And maybe they do this by not being interested in your artwork. Anytime you show them something you've created, they either criticize it, they ignore it, or they make some kind of subtle reaction or shift negatively, energetically, that although it may seem subtle, it may not look outright like mistreatment. It may be just that they aren't interested in your artwork or that they withdraw a little bit of love or praise from you whenever you show them something you've created artistically. Over time, these subtle forms of rejection, even if they are subtle, begin to influence your own subconscious mind because the subconscious mind is slowly absorbed or influenced by its environment. It can be much more quickly influenced through other techniques, like I often talk about subliminals as a very fast technique to alter the subconscious. But over the long haul, it can be influenced in the long term simply by your environment, the things people say around you, the things that you hear often enough through the conscious mind will eventually sink down to your subconscious. So these subtle forms of rejection about your artwork slowly influenced your subconscious mind until finally you no longer needed to be rejected by your parents because you began rejecting this part of yourself. You may have stopped doing artwork altogether. You may have felt a lot of strain and tension around the idea of creating, suppressed your own creative forces, so then you may grow up to be an adult who either thinks that they aren't creative at all, they aren't good at creating new things, new ideas, or whenever you do try to create, you may always feel a kind of tension around it, feeling as though you aren't able to relax enough to create. You aren't able to allow that stream of creativity to flow. This is because there is a shadow aspect to you. Your artistic side was rejected enough by the people around you and then by you yourself that it became absorbed into your shadow self outside the light of your consciousness. So now you won't even be aware that that part of you exists at all. But it's still there, being re-wounded and rejected every time you find a new way to reject that creative side of yourself. And this is just one small case study of these kinds of wounds that are created and how they are created to begin with. This can apply to literally anything: a lack of body confidence, a fear of failure, a poverty mentality, any area of your life in which you feel stuck. You feel as though you aren't able to change it no matter what you try to do. This feeling of stuckness is a very key indicator that what you are experiencing is a rejected aspect of yourself, a shadow aspect that has now been absorbed into the subconscious mind and is what we would call a subconscious negative belief pattern or blockage. Now, when your twin flame comes along, how do twin flame triggers tie into this? Your twin flame, what you have to understand is you and your twin flame have the most attractive magnetic bond imaginable. But unlike many forms of ego-based romantic attraction in our world and in our lives, twin flame love is based on soul level attraction. And by soul level, I mean you are deeply, fully, completely, and irresistibly attracted to one another in your natural soul essence, when you are authentically and fully expressing every aspect of yourself. Now remember, many aspects of yourself were rejected when you were young and then were absorbed into your subconscious mind, became part of the shadow self. These are now what we could also call not only subconscious negative thought patterns or blockages, but also wounds. Wounds that continue to hurt and to hurt us, to negatively impact our lives and relationships in certain ways, sometimes in ways that we are completely unconscious about. However, when our twin flame comes along, because they see us, they understand us, they love us for that person we are at the very core of our soul, for that person we were when we were born, before someone came into our life and said, no, you can't do that, or you can't be that way, or there's no money in that gift or talent, or you shouldn't talk like that, you shouldn't act like that. Before we absorbed all of those learned behaviors, and through that absorption learned to reject aspects of ourself, our twin flame loves us in that state. However, throughout our lives, by the time we meet our twin flame, over 99% of us, nearly all of us, are completely steered away from that soul self, from that authentic self. This is what leads twin flames to run. The true reason twin flames run is because if someone comes into your life and, like your twin flame does, do just this, comes into your life and loves you fully, wholly, and completely, exactly as you truly are, but you aren't familiar with that version of yourself, that authentic self, or you aren't loving, embracing, and accepting every part of yourself in the same way that person is, you will actually reject them. It will manifest as a rejection of them. And what you are truly doing is re-rejecting those aspects of yourself you are too afraid to embrace, that you were taught to reject, that you haven't yet healed. So when twin flames run away from each other, when twin flames reject each other, know that whenever you are rejecting your twin flame, or your twin flame is rejecting you, the true rejection that is happening is a rejection of the self. This is why we refer to triggering in tandem with mirroring. We say twin flames participate in mirroring and triggering. This is because through their twin flame, they are seeing a mirror reflection of their authentic true self. And if they aren't ready to fully accept and embrace and love that person they clearly now see in this metaphorical mirror, then they will reject their twin flame, because their twin flame is revealing to them these aspects, showing to them these aspects. And until these parts of themselves are healed, embraced, loved, and integrated back into their entire self, their authentic self, until they begin to radiate this true authenticity through this triggering, through this healing, they will continue to reject their twin flame over and over, because they are continuing to reject themselves over and over. This is why we have to find a way to address what is going on in the subconscious mind, because so much of this triggering process happens very unconsciously. This is why so often many of you may feel as though your twin flame runner is being triggered and running, and you can so clearly see the ways in which they need to heal, the ways in which they are being triggered, and yet they don't seem to see it themselves. It's because what they are coming face to face with, what these triggers are truly triggering or touching upon, are these deeply seated subconscious wounds or subconscious negative patterns. And because they are subconscious, because they are unconscious, the conscious mind isn't even aware that these patterns exist. We can only identify our own negative subconscious patterns through the manifestations of them. That is why it is so important to address our own subconscious mind reprogramming. And within the twin flame connection, this is the portal to healing because, like I said earlier, it's so easy to look at your twin flame and say they need to heal this and this. But in itself, that is speaking from the ego, because from a soul perspective, they are only reflecting in their own self-rejection, our own self-rejection. Because twin flames share the same energetic frequency. And when one twin flame counterpart is experiencing certain subconscious patterns or blockages, the other is experiencing identical energetic blockages, although, and this is the key, they may manifest themselves differently, which is why you may look at your twin flame and say, well, I don't do that, or I don't talk that way. But the root of the reason that they are reacting that way is the same as some kind of root pattern within yourself. This is also why when we begin to participate in our own self-healing by clearing our own subconscious negative patterns, by having the courage to see the manifestations of these negative patterns and choose consciously to immerse ourselves in positive thought environments that influence and reprogram this subconscious mind in new ways. This is how we truly shift the balance and come into harmony within our twin flame connection, by coming into that harmony within ourselves. One powerful subconscious mind reprogramming tool for uprooting these negative patterns, these wounds, and allowing them to be healed, even the ones you are completely unconscious about, is to listen to subliminal affirmations tracks. Personally, I tried to do a lot of self-healing work through the form of meditation and visualization for years. But I didn't see any results until I started incorporating subliminals. And when I did use subliminals, I started seeing results very, very fast. And a key part of the reason my results came so quickly is because many of my patterns were actually unconscious, my negative patterns. Although I could see the negative manifestations of them, I couldn't always identify the root cause. So subliminals allowed me to identify and reprogram those unconscious patterns, the ones that I wasn't aware of, even though they were impacting me so negatively. I have created a 7-chakra twin flame clearing subliminal. This comes from my website, Sound and Soulful, where I've created over 100 subliminals for all areas of life. So as you can see on the screen, I've created subliminals for physical appearance changes, for mood shifts like confidence and happiness, for the manifestation of specific things like a dream house, a dream job, or money. For twin flames specifically, I have an entire section of subliminals dedicated entirely to shifting the balance of the twin flame connection and addressing certain commonly experienced wounds that you may be experiencing within your connection. The reason I most highly recommend this chakra clearing subliminal is because it is very comprehensive. It addresses blockages stored within all 7 chakras, all of the main energetic centers of the body. It contains 7 binaural beat frequencies, and each of these frequencies resonates with the natural frequency of each of the chakra centers. So essentially, by listening to this subliminal, you are retuning your energy body to your natural state by simultaneously also addressing specific blockages through these unconscious affirmations targeted at each of these chakra centers. The link to this chakra clearing subliminal is in the pinned comment, as well as in the description box of this video. Now, before I close this video, I want to discuss a few specific twin flame triggers. The first trigger I see most often, and I'm putting it first because This is something that I personally struggled with a lot within my connection, especially in the early stages. This is the trigger related to jealousy and insecurity. I'm going to get a little personal here, but I feel guided to do so because I feel that there is someone out there listening who needs to hear my experience with this, who will feel comforted by knowing that they aren't alone in feeling this way. I am a divine feminine within my counterpart, within my relationship with my twin flame. And as a divine feminine, much of my shadow aspects, my shadow self, had to do with a lot of repressed creativity and forced masculinity, because from a young age, I learned that in order to be loved, to be accepted, I had to achieve and show concrete results of my achievement, show concrete progress. I've always been a naturally very creative-minded person, a very artistic person. I was always drawn to the arts. But because these gifts, these talents didn't bring that achievement that the ego likes to see, I wasn't praised for these things. And so I began repressing these aspects of myself, and I began to act in an overly masculine way. I really stepped into this masculine state of being. And by masculine, I mean I looked and presented myself very feminine. I've always enjoyed, hair, clothes, makeup, that kind of thing. But within my connections and relationships, my energy was very masculine. It was very ego-driven. It was very overly masculinized in the sense that I was very competitive. I liked to try to control, and it was this control from this control aspect to my energy that I became very insecure and jealous, because the true reason I was trying to control, besides this repressed feminine energy, this repressed feminine side, was also because I felt a deep lack of security. I was used to building my relationships on external circumstances, on appearances, on achievement, through this ego self. And I felt a deep level insecurity. In fact, because of so many of my parts of my authentic self being rejected from a young age, other kids would call me weird because I love to create, I love to write, I love to go off by myself. I was very empathic, and I'm sure many of you will relate to this. So to fit in, I started putting on appearances, a false self. But beneath this false self, I had this deep sense, and almost a knowing, it truly was a subconscious negative belief that if someone in a romantic relationship saw me for who I truly was, for all my weirdness, all my authenticity, that little girl that I was growing up that loved to create and write and was weird and loved to explore different topics and loved to read, that if someone saw all of those sides to me, they would reject me just as I felt I was rejected by others that I cared about in my formative years. So I always presented this false self within relationships, but also manifested these feelings of jealousy and insecurity, because whenever you have that need to control appearances, that need to control how someone else perceives you, you're always going to be insecure about whether they would love you for who you truly are. You will always be presenting a false self to them. And yet you will find a strange ego-based sense of calm, of security in this false self. So it's this kind of paradox. And one big manifestation of this is a lack of confidence, because how can you be confident when you aren't presenting your authentic self, when you feel as though others are loving you and accepting you based on a false self? So when my twin flame came along and he loved me and saw me for everything that I was, my ego had trouble trusting it. So my biggest trigger was feeling this lack of confidence and being this authentic version of myself, and allowing that false self to crumble, to truly come into my soulful, authentic, creative, divine feminine self, and to release these feelings of needing to control, whether it was controlling him, controlling the relationship, controlling how he perceived me. So I don't know if any of you needed to hear that, but I felt really guided to share that. So let me know in the comments below either what your triggers are within your twin flame connection, or whether you have specifically experienced the jealousy, insecurity, and control trigger. The second trigger I want to talk about is fear of intimacy and connection. This again comes from a deeply seated sense of insecurity, instability, a feeling as though you are not safe to love and be loved within relationships, which is a big key of what I address through my 7 chakra clearing subliminal, as well as just that feeling of security, developing a strong inner core so that you're capable of feeling secure within romantic relationships. The third big trigger for twin flames kind of encompasses triggers 1 and 2 because they're all very interconnected, but any kind of childhood wounding. So especially in your relationships with your parents, any way in which your parents rejected you, hurt you, either emotionally or verbally, whatever the case may have been, or however they misunderstood you. All of those parts of yourself that felt misunderstood, especially by your family growing up, were then cast into the shadows, the metaphorical shadows, and became your shadow self. And then when your twin flame comes along, they essentially pick up all of those pieces to you and put them back all together and then reflect them all back to you. And at first, this is exhilarating to you. It's exciting. It's thrilling. It makes you overflow with love. That's when you're open. But so often, those fears, those ego-driven insecurities and doubts come back into the picture. So after that initial, what we call the honeymoon phase, that is so often why twin flames run, because they feel so seen, so understood, that paradoxically, it terrifies them, because the last time, probably in early childhood, they allowed themselves to be that seen and that understood by someone. They were wounded, they were hurt. So it takes time to heal, to stabilize that inner core, to heal to the point where you can feel secure and stable and fully expressing your authentic self and being loved for that authentic self within this twin flame connection. I hope this video was insightful for you as you perhaps reflect upon the triggers within your own twin flame relationship for the purpose of beginning to heal them and come into a deeper, more harmonious connection with your twin flame. If I did resonate with you, please subscribe to this channel, join our community of like-minded, conscious, creative beings here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram at Magnetize Yourself, where I post high vibrational content to keep your vibration up all day long. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again in the next podcast.